Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the book Counseling Adolescence, A Proactive Approach for Young People by Catherine and David Geldard and Rebecca Yunfu. So these authors wrote this book to help counselors and aspiring counselors who work with adolescents on approaches for therapy and working with adolescents because it is very different than working with children or adults. So part 1 talks about understanding the adolescent or the young person. So chapter 1 talks about the nature of adolescence. So the authors talk about biological challenges, cognitive, psychological, social, and moral and spiritual challenges that adolescents go through. And so it's important that we understand these different aspects of their development so that we know, that they're going through a lot, and this could be very confusing. This could be challenging for them, and it's important to know what they're going through so that we can be able to help them and navigate this with them in therapy. So all of these challenges impact and influence each other, and so that's why it's important that we understand each of them individually and the way that they sort of intertwine with one another. Chapter 2 talks about the influence of childhood experiences. So early attachment problems was a big part of this chapter. They heavily influence the way that adolescents go through life with relationships, with themselves, and if they have negative attachment problems early on in life, that will carry with them through their adolescence and even into adulthood. Unhelpful parental behavior was another big part of this chapter. So specifically talking about parents who are overly critical of their children or who have addiction problems or overall just don't send a great message in terms of behavior for their children will impact the way that their children behave in a social setting. Sadly, adolescents do experience abuse and trauma. Not all of them, but some do. And this will impact the way that they navigate relationships or experiences going forward in their life. Having genetic effects like ADHD, Tourette syndrome, or other learning disabilities will impact the way that they feel about themselves going forward in life and the way that they need to navigate in the classroom as well. And speaking of the classroom, educational experiences are a huge impact on their development, either positively or negatively speaking. So in the positive realm, they either like learning, they thrive in the classroom, they have a great social circle, they thrive in an academic setting, or alternatively, they can be excluded, bullied, struggle in the classroom due to learning disabilities, or just disliking education in general, which can negatively impact their self-esteem and confidence. Chapter 3 talks about the environments and how that affects an adolescent's development. So, family environment is a big one. The way a family's style of functioning, a parental style, the way that their parents talk to each other or interact with each other, and the way that the family communicates overall is a big impact on their development. So, if this means positively speaking, they might be better fit and more positive with relationships going forward. And alternatively, if they have a negative family environment, this may impact them negatively. School and societal stress could negatively impact them in their development, specifically relating to their self-esteem. So it's important that we help them navigate their own confidence struggles in the classroom so that we can help them start gaining a more positive perspective on themselves going forward. Some adolescents during this time do enter the workforce, in which this is a great tool for responsibility, learning how to establish professional relationships, and it's a great time during development to establish this now so that they can carry this with them into their adulthood. And with all of these changes come with more changes, obviously, and that includes relationships. So adolescents are maturing during this time, which means they may fall out of relationships, they may gain new relationships, and that's okay. But it's important that we're understanding of that so we can help them feel okay with changing relationships too. During this time, they are exposed to sexuality for the first time, so that may lead to issues, societally speaking. They may feel isolated when exploring their own individual sexual orientation or sexual identity, and sexual behaviors can be heavily influenced by their peers. So if society is telling them that they should be sexually active, but they're not necessarily educated on the safe sexual habits or sexual interactions in a safe way, this could be very dangerous for them because that could lead to unwanted pregnancy, that could lead to sexually transmitted diseases, which obviously is very scary for an adolescent. And lastly, if their parents are struggling financially or a parent of theirs is unemployed, this could impact the way that they view money going forward. This could impact the way that they feel about their socioeconomic standing in society and could lead to a lot of stress and anxiety for them. Chapter 4 talks about the challenges that young people endure during this time. So they go through a lot of influence, specifically relating to their peers. During childhood, or parent influence was a huge part of their development, but as they're entering a new level of society, they tend to look to their peers more than they do their parents, which might be a positive thing if they're in the right crowd, but sometimes this could lead to smoking, drinking alcohol, testing out drugs, risky sexual behavior, or risk taking in general. And this chapter also talks about being overly aware of their physical appearance. So this is a big time for puberty, a lot of physical changes, and that could lead to gaining weight. And so this may negatively impact their confidence. It's important that we are aware of these challenges so that we can help them navigate these challenges in their life. Chapter 5 looks at this macrosystem, exosystem, mesosystem, microsystem of the young person. So the microsystems is like their school, their home, if they have a job, their workplace, their neighborhood. The exosystem's more socially speaking or societally speaking. So the government, religion, social media, celebrities, all of that sort of thing. And then the macro system looks at cultural attitudes and ideals. And the last chapter of part 1 is chapter 6, which is the development of mental health problems. So along with physical changes come with psychological changes, which could lead to the development of mental health issues. So depression and anxiety are usually the leading mental health issues in adolescence, especially with events like, parental separation, moving away from loved ones, a loved one or a pet passing away could lead to depression and anxiety. There are other mental health issues like suicidal ideation and behaviors, PTSD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. These could all develop during adolescence. So it's important to know how these develop and how these start to present in adolescence so that we can establish therapeutic techniques to help them work through these mental health problems. Okay, part 2 looks at the proactive counseling for young people. So in chapter 7, we talk about making counseling relevant for young people. So, like I said earlier, peer influence is a big part of adolescence. So it's more so they're looking to the opinions of their peers rather than trusted adults. And so that might turn adolescents away from counseling because they're not being counseled by their peers. They're being counseled by a trusted adult. So it's important that we fit therapy and the techniques we use with them to their developing independence so that they feel comfortable, they feel that they have a sense of autonomy in therapy, and so that they want to come back. There are several benefits for adolescents when combining individual therapy and family therapy, especially because if their parents are on the same page as them with their needs, therapeutically speaking, then they may feel more comfortable going to therapy and expressing their needs to their parents going forward. Chapter 8 talks about the foundations of the proactive approach. So the proactive approach looks at the essentialist view, constructive thinking, therapist aspects, and the client-therapist relationship. So the biggest takeaway of this chapter was the client-therapist relationship. Especially like I said before, adolescents aren't necessarily looking for the influence of a trusted adult. They're looking more towards their peers. It's important that we establish a level of rapport with them so that they feel comfortable coming back to therapy and sort of taking what we have to say seriously. This also means that we need to understand our own inner child in order to connect with them on a deeper level, because that'll allow us to gain a level of empathy with what they're going through so that we can better understand and help them navigate the challenges that they're experiencing. Okay, chapter 9 looks at the proactive process for counseling young people. So, being able to understand and accommodate the developmental needs of adolescents, showing that we believe them when they're telling us their problems, matching their style of communication, proactive approaches in therapy, and respecting the level of pace that they are comfortable sharing new information with is a very proactive approach to therapy with adolescents. This also comes with a level of flexibility because during this time they are going through several changes, which means that the topics of therapy will be very different every time they come in for therapy or for different sessions. And it's up to us to be okay with that, because being rigid with what we talk about and what we work on in therapy might turn them off from coming back. So that means building a professional relationship, looking into their problems and validating their emotions with those problems, communicating that these problems are okay and they're normal and that they can get through it is important. And this all is very helpful with multiple sessions. But it is important to note that young people do struggle with consistency in therapy. Chapter 10 looks at making use of adolescent communication processes. So, like I said before, peer influence is huge. Adolescents would much rather confide in their peers over their trusted adults because they're in the process of individuation. Communication style is different in each conversation for young people. So young people talking to other young people looks different than a young person talking to an adult. So it's very highly recommended for therapists to take the communication style of their client to build a rapport and a level of understanding with their client so that they feel more comfortable. Self-disclosure within the therapist is going to show that we are willing to be vulnerable with our clients so that they feel more comfortable being vulnerable in session as well. And lastly, allowing for client control over the topic of each session promotes trust with our clients and us so that they feel the desire to come back and the desire to open up each time and really give us a great opportunity to help them navigate really challenging aspects of their lives. Chapter 11 looks at useful counseling micro skills. So micro counseling in adolescent is very great for it's great for engagement, supporting, resolving conflicts, and to help them start feeling better. Observation of the young person is very helpful and provides key information about their mood, their intellectual ability, their confidence, their self-esteem, attitude, their beliefs, their values, and their social influences. Using multiple strategies for questions and statements provide helpful feedback, and it promotes engagement for the client in session, which ultimately leads to productivity overall. And it's not a bad thing to include humor, especially when working with adolescents. It might make them feel more comfortable. Chapter 12 looks at promoting change in young people. Thoughts, emotions, and behaviors play off of each other, so changing one is likely to change others, which means emotional change can be relieving for the client, however, not necessarily going to cause permanent change to thoughts and behaviors influencing those emotions. So in order for effective change to occur, all three of those factors have to change. Strategies like symbolism, creativity, cognitive change, psychoeducational techniques are very helpful when changing the thought process within an adolescent child. So planning to involve action is the most helpful technique when changing the behavior of an adolescent. And the last chapter, chapter 13, is maintaining a collaborative relationship. So having a solid professional relationship just promotes a level of comfortability within our client. So it means that being proactive as a therapist when noting a potential shift in the professional relationship is huge to make sure they are still comfortable, to make sure that they still want to come back to therapy. Because at times, a therapist relationship is going to change no matter if they're an adolescent, if they're a child, if they're an adult. It happens. But it's important for us to define what that might mean and to sort of establish a different level of rapport with our client with this change. Collaboration allows the young person to feel more comfortable with what is being discussed in session, which promotes consistency in session. Shifting the mindset of the client can boost the counseling process. So addressing motivation and participation in sessions, so allowing them to lead the conversation, allowing them to let the conversation change from topic to topic is important for them to stay engaged in session. And this is a great opportunity for us to promote optimism and hope. Lastly, there are several factors that can prohibit a productive professional relationship, but it's our job to be as proactive as possible with this change. And that means establishing comfortability, establishing or relinquishing control over session and letting the adolescent take complete control over the topic, the pace of information being shared, and overall the relationship in general. Okay, so the question I want to ask you as future clinicians, what do you think is the most important tool to have when working with an adolescent child? Especially if you're interested with working with them during this very developmentally challenging time, what do you think is imperative to have as counselors so that we can help them navigate a very isolating time?